I read this kind of thought-provoking article the other day, and it was thought-provoking on a couple different levels, but it was kind of, in a sense, a New Year's resolution kind of article. I mean, it really wasn't about that, but in a sense it was, which is why I'm sitting here with the treadmill in the background, because maybe for some of you, that's one of your kind of New Year's resolutions. Well, in this particular article, it, basically it was asking the readers to answer or finish this sentence. And the sentence began like this: I want to be. Simple, right? I want to be. But what this article is talking about is, if you kind of have an answer to that question, it's one thing just to have an answer to that question. You really need a plan to get there, right? So, for example, you might end it, I want to be loving. Okay, I want to be more loving. What is your plan to become more loving? How are you going to go about doing that? I want to be more kind. Same thing. What's your plan to become more kind? I want to be rich. Okay, what's your plan for being rich? I want to be more healthy. Okay, what's your plan for becoming more healthy? You see, what was interesting about that to me is, as I began to think about that, I thought, well, you know what, I could answer those questions in some of the same ways there. Definitely be more loving, more kind. Rich, I don't know about that. Just seems like it's going to cause me troubles. Definitely more healthy. But as I was thinking about it more in depth, and kind of really almost prayerfully considering what it is that I would want to be, how I would want to be different, I guess you could say. The thing that kept coming back to me, the word that kept popping into my head, was the word wise. I would love to be more wise. So the question is, how do I get there? I mean, what's my plan? Is being more wise, does that mean I got to read more books? Well, maybe. I mean, I can be more knowledgeable, but will I be more wise? How do I become more wise? It seems to be much bigger than just reading more books or paying attention to particular details so I'm smarter. Wisdom is different. You know, there's this biblical story where King Solomon, he was David's son, he was taking over as king, and God gave him the choice to ask for whatever he wanted. And Solomon asked that he would be wise. He wanted to be the wisest person around. And God gave him that gift. And what's interesting is, Solomon, while he did make some big mistakes along the way, he was a very wise leader. He was very knowledgeable. But as I thought about that, I thought about how being wise is such a tricky thing, because wisdom, like I said, it's different than being smart, being intellectual. Wisdom has to do with something much deeper into who we are and how we respond to the world around us. So, the Apostle Paul wrote a couple letters to the churches in Corinth. And we have what's called two, because we have First Corinthians and Second Corinthians. Some people say that there's fragments of different letters that have been brought together, but there was at least one other letter that Paul refers to that we don't really have a copy of. But in the middle of, or right at the beginning of one of his very first, the First Corinthians, that first letter, Paul seems to be making reference to the fact that there have been people that have come in after him who have seemed much smarter than he was. And so they challenge Paul on the basis of his knowledge, of his wisdom, so to speak. And Paul is trying to respond to, at least one of the things he's trying to respond to in Corinthians, is this question about wisdom. And so in chapter 2 of 1 Corinthians, he writes this. He says, "When I came to you, brothers and sisters, I did not come proclaiming the mystery of God to you with lofty words or wisdom. I decided to know nothing among you except Christ and Him crucified. And I came to you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. My speech and my proclamation were not as plausible words of wisdom, but with a demonstration of the Spirit and of power, so that your faith might not rest on human wisdom, but on the power of God. Yet among the mature, we do speak of wisdom, though it is not the wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age who are doomed to perish. But we speak of God's wisdom, secret and hidden, which God decreed before the ages for our glory. None of the rulers of this age understood it, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. There's a lot to unpack in that little passage. But basically, what Paul is talking about here is there seems to be two levels of wisdom. And there's one level of wisdom which he calls the wisdom of this world, which is like get real smart, get real rich, get all the things that you need, like hold on to all those things. And then there's this other wisdom that is of God, which those who are considered wise of this world simply do not understand. And what is that wisdom? Paul kind of says it right there in this passage. I came to you not with these wise, lofty words, but I came to you knowing nothing except Christ crucified. In other words, he came to us, Paul came to that church knowing nothing but the sacrifice of Jesus, knowing nothing but who Jesus was and how Jesus gave his all for humanity, for all of us. In a sense, what Paul is saying here is that wisdom of self-sacrifice, self-giving, completely emptying oneself of power and control in order to love and care for another person, Paul labels that as the wisdom of God. Now, again, when I pray for wisdom, I have to ask myself, what kind of wisdom am I really praying for? The kind of wisdom that's going to move me ahead in this world, or the kind of wisdom that is going to be so self-giving that there is a sense of wholeness within that wisdom? I think that's what Paul was talking about. And you know what? I think that could be my prayer for 2026. That God would somehow help me become more wise than maybe what I can even imagine with my head. That God will help me become more wise in how I treat people, how I care for people, how I look out for the well-being of others, even before myself. That's what Paul modeled to the church, because that's what Paul understood Jesus modeled to the world.